Winter, 1944. A remote POW camp in the northern United States. The snow had been falling for 3 straight days. Inside the wooden barracks, a group of German Army prisoners of war sat in silence, wrapped in thin blankets, their breath visible in the freezing air. The stove in the corner barely worked. Every gust of wind made the walls creak like the building might collapse. No one spoke much anymore. Rumors had started spreading the night before. They moved the trucks closer to the gate. I heard guards talking about transport. Transport in winter means one thing: execution. That was what many of them believed. On the Eastern Front, stories of mass executions had spread like wildfire. And now, far from home, in a foreign land covered in endless snow, fear felt heavier than the cold. Suddenly, the barracks door burst open. A United States Army guard stepped in, his boots crunching against the frozen floor. "Outside, all of you, line up." No anger in his voice, no shouting. That somehow made it worse. The prisoners exchanged glances. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered quiet prayers. They shuffled outside into the blinding white landscape. And that's when they saw it, piled near the fence. Strange wooden frames with long curved boards attached. None of them recognized the equipment. One prisoner squinted. "Are those stretchers?" Another shook his head slowly. "No, they don't carry bodies to the camp." A third man, who had once seen winter sports in Bavaria as a child, felt his stomach drop. "Those are skis." The word spread through the line like electricity. Skis. Why would guards give prisoners skis? There was only one explanation that made sense in their terrified minds. They were being sent into the frozen wilderness. No coats, no maps, no food. A silent death in the snow. No bullets needed. One of the younger prisoners began to shake, not from cold, but from panic. "They don't want witnesses. They'll say we escaped." Up in the watchtower, an American guard waved his arm. "Move closer. Grab a pair." The prisoners didn't move. To them, the skis didn't look like sports equipment. They looked like a death sentence. The line of prisoners stood frozen in place. Snow blew across the open yard, stinging their faces like needles. The pile of wooden skis sat only a few meters away now. Up close, there was no mistake. Curved tips, leather straps, long poles. Real skis. But that didn't make anyone feel safer. One of the older prisoners, a former schoolteacher from Munich, whispered, "They're not going to shoot us. They're going to let the cold do it." Another man swallowed hard. "In this snow, we won't last a night." A U.S. guard waved again. "Move up! Each man take a pair!" Still, no one stepped forward. The silence stretched too long. Then a second guard approached, boots crunching loudly in the snow. He didn't look angry, just tired and confused. "What's the holdup?" he muttered to another soldier. The prisoners didn't understand the English, but tone alone made their hearts pound. Orders were being repeated. Gestures became sharper. Finally, one of the prisoners, Carl, a former farm boy who had grown up near the Bavarian Alps, slowly walked forward. His hands trembled as he picked up a pair of skis. He turned them over like they were some kind of trap. Leather bindings, worn wood, real equipment. He looked back at the others. "They're normal," he said quietly in German. "Just skis." "That's worse," someone replied. "They expect us to use them." Within minutes, every prisoner held a pair. The guards began pointing toward the open gate of the inner yard, not outside the camp, but toward a wide snow-covered field beyond the barracks. No trees, no buildings, just white emptiness. A younger prisoner's voice cracked. "They're making us run for it. Then they'll say we escaped." Panic started spreading through the group like fire under ice. A few men shook their heads violently. One dropped his skis and backed away. "I won't go! I won't die out there!" But the guards didn't raise rifles. They didn't shout. Instead, one of them bent down, placed his own boot into a ski binding, and clipped in. The prisoners stared. Another American soldier did the same. Then, to everyone's confusion, the two guards pushed off and began gliding awkwardly across the snow, wobbling, nearly falling. One of them actually did fall, landing flat on his back while the other burst out laughing. The sound was so unexpected, so human, that it broke the tension for a split second. The prisoners looked at each other, unsure. This didn't look like an execution. It looked like training. But why? A guard stood up again and gestured toward the prisoners' skis, then toward the field. He made a pushing motion with his arms. "Like this, try." The prisoners hesitated. If this was a trick, it was a strange one. Slowly, Carl placed his skis on the snow. His hands fumbled with the straps. He hadn't done this since he was a child. Another prisoner muttered, "If we fall, they'll leave us there." Carl took a breath and pushed forward. For a moment he wobbled wildly. Then, muscle memory. He slid forward a few meters. Nothing happened. No shots, no shouting, just snow, wind, and the quiet scrape of wood over ice. Behind him, one by one, the other prisoners began trying too, terrified, confused, expecting death at any second. Instead, they found themselves doing something none of them expected in a POW camp. Skiing, under the gray winter sky. Still unsure if it was mercy, or the beginning of something they didn't yet understand. The wind calmed as the prisoners slowly gathered in the open field, skis still strapped to their boots. No one had tried to run. No one had been shot, and now the fear that had gripped them for hours was turning into something even stranger. Confusion. Carl glided to a stop and looked back toward the guards. One of the Americans clapped his hands together, not in mockery, but encouragement. "Good! Keep going!" The tone wasn't harsh, it sounded almost proud. The prisoners exchanged uncertain looks. Another guard pointed toward a distant hill beyond the camp buildings. It wasn't outside the perimeter, just a long snow-covered slope inside the secured area. One of the Americans removed his gloves and gestured slowly, clearly trying to communicate. He pointed to the skis, then to the hill, then gave a thumbs up. One of the prisoners who understood a little English stepped forward. "You want us to practice?" The guard nodded eagerly. "Yes, ski. Good for winter. Work detail soon." The word work made the prisoners tense again. But the guard quickly shook his head and pointed to the snowbanks piled near camp roads, then mimed shoveling. Snow clearing, transport paths, camp supply routes. It started to make sense. The heavy snowfall had buried roads and storage areas. Trucks couldn't move properly. Foot travel was slow and dangerous in deep drifts. But men on skis, they could move quickly, carry messages, scout paths, help clear routes faster. The guards weren't sending them to die, they were preparing them for winter survival work, inside the camp. Carl looked down at the skis. Back home, skiing had meant childhood, mountains, fresh air, freedom. Here, he had thought it meant death. A strange, quiet laugh escaped him, half relief, half disbelief. Around him, other prisoners began to relax. One even attempted a careful turn and nearly fell, causing a ripple of nervous chuckles. For the first time in months, something in the camp didn't feel like survival. It felt almost human. One of the American guards skied past clumsily again and called out with a grin, "Tomorrow, race!" The prisoners didn't understand every word, but they understood the smile. And in that frozen field, under the gray winter sky, fear slowly melted into something no one had expected to find in a POW camp, a moment of normal life, a reminder that not every unknown meant death. Sometimes, it just meant skis.